Okay. Blanket wrap chats. We're back after I don't know, 2 month break? Is that how long it is? Hold on, I've got to look this up now. I think it was a 2 month break. I'm gonna be real.
Been about that, yeah.
Hmm?
It's been about that, yeah.
Yeah, it's been about 2 months since the last Terraria video, and then 5 months since Blanket Wrapped Chats was first introduced. Let's get into it. So, Hollow Knight is a pretty cool game. Your character is quite literally dropped into a world that is unknown to you, and your goal is to explore and figure out what you're doing, basically. My
Mm-hmm.
friend Drostelin is on here.
So,
I really hope his audio comes through well in the recording. Okay. The art style of Hollow Knight, what do you think about it?
it's a bit different, I think, than most other games you see. You've seen a lot of 2.5D type 3D type characters, like take how Ori looks,
Yeah,
and you have what is simply simple lines and really, really good shading for the art style.
oh yeah, it's got an absolutely amazing art style. The game is gorgeous in almost every segment. Actually, in every segment. I don't know of a part of the game that looks bland and uninteresting. Uh,
Yeah,
it's definitely a lot different from older games like Super Metroid and Castlevania, which are much more pixelated, as that was what
yeah,
the
for
hardware could
sure.
handle back then. But now
What's
we've
interesting
now we've got powerful equipment that can handle such beautiful graphics.
what's interesting to me is the art style is simple yet very hard to replicate. You've seen I've seen many an artist who's tried to have a good replication of what the art style is, but they've always talked about how hard it is to replicate the shading and how good it actually looks.
It's so simplistic yet so complicated.
I think the art style, at least for the graphics wise, the way the parallax backgrounds sort of look are very impressive and give more depth to your environment, especially in some of the beginning areas where you can
Yeah,
see background movement in the background.
yeah, it's probably my favorite art style out of any game because while it looks simplistic, all that simplicity comes together to make some genuinely amazing art sets.
For sure.
All right, the music though. What do you think about the music?
Some of the music I've absolutely sobbed at. Some of the music, pretty good jam. And some of it's just very good for the environmental feel of the game, particularly areas such as Deep Nest or otherwise. You feel very good listening to the way it sounds. You go to Crystal Peaks and it's got like a
Sort of tinkly background, like
tinkly
someone's plucking
background.
away at the crystals.
Yeah, it feels very, and the way the sounds are, it's like very echoey.
Oh yeah,
You feel like you're in a cave.
Hollow Knight soundtrack is 100% worth a listen. It's got soundtracks from just calm, peaceful, explore the environment type, like you hear in Green Path, all the way up to such intensity that you may as well be fighting for the safety of the world, like
Christopher,
the theme of the Radiance, for instance.
Christopher Larkin, I think, is one of the best orchestra musicians of his time.
Christopher Larkin is absolutely amazing at writing music. But, well, we know about the art style and the music, and we know how good both of those are. Does the gameplay hold up for you?
The gameplay's held up pretty well for me. I recently watched a video talking about how it was comparing Ori and Hollow Knight, talking about how simple the gameplay was. And the while Hollow Knight is very simple, and its movement and its I'm thinking of it. Its combat. It holds up very well with very diverse bosses and areas in order to challenge players to keep going. While I think platforming isn't exactly the goal of the game, there are some very interesting sections which use it very well, and areas which are only unlocked by certain abilities, which I feel, while it can feel slow at first, pacing generally feels very good.
Oh, yeah, no, the gameplay is genuinely amazing, and I'm assuming you're talking about Mossbag's video on Did Ori copy Hollow Knight?
Yes, that
Yeah.
was a good
Um, the gameplay is so
video.
perfectly tight that, well, actually, it's a bit loose, to be honest. You can make mistakes all the time in the game, and you'll still be able to beat it. After all, that's what a Metroidvania is about. It's about learning from the mistakes you made so you can get better and progress. The combat is definitely very intricate, and as simple as it is with its side attacks and its up and down attacks, the down attack bounces you off of enemies in a sort of pogo manner that really helps the game feel more alive. And it also is used as a platforming element in segments such as the White Palace or Path of Pain. So it's genuinely amazing what it can do.
It feels really good, and I'm glad that you mentioned Path of Pain because I feel like Team Cherry really was able to push the limits with such a game, especially as it's been commented by them that they really try to avoid saying that it was a Metroidvania because during the beginning of the development of the game, they didn't know exactly which direction it was going, but they wanted to take inspiration from a lot of games of old, such as Zelda 2.
I can see a lot of inspiration from games.
You see a lot of inspiration, and I like how they've been able to push because you have simple platforming, then you get to Path of Pain, and that really starts pushing. It pushes the limits on
Yeah,
what they've been able to
I've
do.
I've heard players call it a Celeste level embedded in Hollow Knight, and personally, when it comes to Hollow Knight, platforming isn't my strong point. I am much better at the combat side of things. I'm not exactly able to defeat any Radiants kind of hard good at the game, but I'm good enough that I can usually clear every boss fight first try now.
Yeah, it's very, very good. With the combat, it's been very good pacing, I think, for me, because you beat the game, you eventually figure out, oh, there's another ending to do. You try to go beat Radiance,
Yeah, there's a couple
and then
different
there's
endings to
Gotham.
the game, and without spoiling too much, there's one where you have to collect a whole lot and go through an entire large platforming segment to access it. And then there's one that requires you beat every boss in the game in a row, which is a lot harder than it sounds because while the early bosses are very simple to defeat, once you start getting to the later fights like Nightmare King, it gets incredibly difficult to keep up the pace. And that's part of the reason I love the game is because it challenges the player without being unfair, except for Grey Prince Zote and Ascended Markoth. Those two fights can screw off. That's just my personal opinion, though. I hate those fights.
Yeah, some people have called some bosses like Urdprin's artificial difficulty because he is a very, very hard fight to get used to.
His
But
attacks
overall, the
are easy to
bosses,
dodge, but they're so poorly telegraphed. Well, I wouldn't say poorly telegraphed because they aren't telegraphed at all, that it's impossible to know what's happening next. To the people who have beaten him on Radiant, I applaud them because just holy cow, there's no way I could do that.
yeah, it's very difficult. I'd say even though there is a lot you can do, such as being able to beat rock bosses on Radiant, it's definitely not for everybody. But if this is a game, this is also a game where I think completionists can have a very good long
One
stretch of time
one
to
ball
be
of a
able to.
time, yeah. It's an absolutely amazing game. overall, I'd say that it's my favorite game of all time as of this moment, and I don't
If
think that'll
we
change even with
um,
Silksong, although if Silksong is just as good as Hollow Knight in its own perspectives, then Silksong could very easily top Hollow Knight for me.
same, I am look. I'm very much looking forward to Silk Song and seeing how much further Team Cherry pushes the limits on the
Yep,
games that they create.
it definitely looks like Silksong's gonna be a lot different. Maybe not so much better in the sense that it's been expanded upon, but different in the sense that you'll get a different experience without ruining Hollow Knight's experience. Because Hollow Knight had its own sort of movement system and combat system, and it looks like Silksong's going to be a lot faster paced.
Yeah, definitely more fast paced. I believe that might be the reason they created the quest system that they talked about
Oh,
several
yeah.
times.
The quest system looks like it's going to be a lot of fun as well.
The customizations, a lot of what they've shown for Silk Song, I'm very much looking forward to.
Yep.
I hope that it builds on top of what Hollow Knight has already created for the fans and community.
Yep. On a scale of 1 to 10, how would you rate Hollow Knight?
I definitely say 10. Well, no, I'd say 9.5 because there's very few there's very few flaws for me in that game.
There's. The only flaws I really find are just two of the boss fights, which you can avoid one of them entirely, and that's Great Prince, so you never have to do Great Prince if you don't want to. But Markoth is an unavoidable fight, and I think that while you don't have to do the Ascended version for more than the boss rush to the fight to the last ending, I still think it needs. It feels like Markoth's got aimbot, and that would knock it down to about a 9 for me, which is still higher than any game I've ever played before.
Definitely.
Because as much as I love the Zelda series, Hollow Knight just it gave me an experience that no other game could have offered. So,
Very few games have made me shed tears during the last parts of the
oh
experience.
yeah, that final
Hollow Knight
boss
did that
was
for me,
that Hollow Knight. That final boss was rough, dude. That
for sure.
all of the final bosses are difficult in their own rights. All right, well, that should wrap it up for this episode. Thanks for tuning in.
Thank
See
you
ya.
for tuning in. Bye.